Hello, YouTubers. Joe Kersey here on the 4th of March, 2015 at just a hair before 11 in the morning Eastern Time. Now, I have a story to tell you about the last half of this little discursus. But first, I want to revisit an idea that I probably mentioned almost in an offhand way probably well over a year ago now, maybe even a year and a half ago. And it was an idea for one of these reality shows on cable television. Well, I don't know, maybe network television, for all I know. I mean, the kind of crud they churn out. And it was, the idea for the cable channel was called the Dueling channel. The Dueling channel, D-U-E-L-I-N-G, Dueling channel. As in two guys fighting each other, or swords, beating each other up, or whatever. And the idea was it'd be like, you could have like a half hour, I hope you could stretch it out to an hour, and you would have the backstory of whatever quarrel occasioned this duel. With a little bit of a bio about each of the combatants, and for that matter, maybe even their seconds. A reenactment of the offensive action that led up to the challenge, negotiations between the seconds, choice of weapons, that sort of thing. And then, of course, the last, 7 or 8 or 10 minutes of the thing would be showing the actual duel. I mean, and my original idea was, you show an actual duel. Well, of course, that would be massively illegal and unethical and all that kind of stuff. But there would still be a way somebody could do that as kind of a quasi bit of street theater stuff. A theatrical duel, if you will. But I think the essence of reality television is it has to be real. You want to see that big ass on that woman acting like an idiot in her kitchen. You don't want that to just be some sort of stuffing, like some sort of fat suit. You want to see this guy get taken out. Well, you get the gist of that idea. But, I actually first had this, I first had this idea way back in the late 1970s, showing that once again, quite often I'm way ahead of my time. Okay, enough of that nonsense. Now, the story today I want to tell you about actually concerns a duel. I mean, hence the lead-in. And it comes from a book called The Frigates. Magnificent book. It may well be out of print. The Frigates. And it was published by Time Life Books in 1979. And the lead author was a fellow called, well, the actual author, but there were about 5 guys that consulted on this. The lead author was Henry Gruppe, G-R-U-P-P-E. Time Life Books. And it talks about, the initial fleet of frigates that, were the original ships in the actual American Navy that were constructed during the 1790s. And a number of these they fought in the War of 1812. They fought the pirates off the Barbary Coast. One of them, the Philadelphia, was actually burned in one of the harbors over there in the North African coast because it ran aground and they couldn't salvage it. And of course, the most famous of them, or at least the most notable of them, that's actually is still a commissioned ship in the United States Navy, is the USS Constitution. If you ever get to Boston, make it a point to go spend the better part of an afternoon seeing the USS Constitution over there in the Boston Navy Yard. It's on the north side of the Charles River. Absolutely one of the most impressive things you're ever going to see in your life. And it's really no drawing can do it justice. You really have to see this vessel in person. Here's a drawing as it appeared in 1812. It's very stylized. Obviously it's meant to show you the rigging and the sails and the shape of the hull and so forth. But to get a feel for this bit of technology, and this was the high-end technology of its day in terms of sailing speed, hull strength, and even armament for a frigate. Much heavily armed, more heavily armed than most frigates of the time. Faster and more maneuverable than a lot of the British vessels. And of course, it's most famous for its thick plank hulls. And these things are thick. These are thick hulls. Well worth a visit. But sort of the hero of today's story is Stephen Decatur, who was a very impetuous, gallant naval officer of the time. Young, as all these guys basically were. Because essentially, by the time they were in their early 40s, they were basically, not really much more fit for sea duty. That's not true of all of them. Some of them were. But Stephen Decatur liked to fight duels. And in fact, that's ultimately how he lost his life. He lost a duel. But along the way, he won several of them. And here's a picture of the man himself, Stephen Decatur. And I'm going to read you a passage from this, and bear in mind this is not my work. This is a copyrighted work. I'm fully acknowledging that, and this is fair editorial use. It's in the nature of a book review, and I want to read you this paragraph about Stephen Decatur giving some advice about a duel, because it's absolutely classic. Decatur had been a prime mover, if not a principal, in a much more serious affair, an affair of honor. That was my insertion, by the way, saying affair of honor. It involved midshipman Joseph Bainbridge. Now, this is not to be confused with a fellow named William Bainbridge, who was also in the Navy at that time. Then barely 16 years old of the USS New York, one of the frigates. Bainbridge and several of his messmates quietly took their seats one night at the Opera in Malta, only to be subjected to loud, pointed observations about Yankee courage from officers of the Royal Navy sitting nearby. Now, this is not to cast aspersions on the Royal Navy for any of my English and British friends looking at this, by any means. As midshipman Bainbridge left the opera house, he was followed and further insulted by the British governor's young private secretary, an excellent marksman, notorious for having killed several men in duels. Bainbridge knocked him flat. Cards are quickly exchanged. I wonder if they're like cards like the Joker's a YouTube channel. But the next morning, the English officer representing the governor's secretary was in for a surprise, devised by Stephen Decatur, who had volunteered to act as Bainbridge's second. The usual terms, pistols at 10 paces, inquired the Englishman. Yes, it will be pistols, replied Decatur, but pistols at 4 paces. The Englishman's eyes widened. Good Lord, sir, he exclaimed, that looks like murder. Not murder, Decatur corrected, but surely death. He went on to explain, your man is a professional duelist, while mine is not. The duel was held according to Decatur's specifications. The young Englishman, unaccustomed to staring into the muzzle of an opponent's pistol at such close range, wavered, and his shot missed the American midshipman altogether. Bainbridge, instructed by Decatur to hold low against the recoil if he valued his life, shot his antagonist dead. Now, when I first read this, I just loved that story. But over the years, as you know, one tends to do from time to time, one slightly misremembers, in a way almost remembered in a better way. Because over the years, I'd always remembered that story as shotguns at 3 paces, which basically would have you almost holding the shotgun right up against the other guy. Maybe one of the maybe one of the episodes on the Dueling channel could feature shotguns at 3 paces, or hell, even shotguns at 7 paces. So read that. If you can find that book, I highly advise you reading it, looking at it, and in any case, go see the Constitution. Well, both the written document and the USS Constitution. All righty. Bye-bye, YouTubers.